the last thing that we looked into was the weight fraction of phases. If you remember, uh, we looked into the tie line and we said that in a two-phase region, which is this region, if we want to find out the number, the amount of both the phases, liquid and alpha, we'll use this tie line. And basically, if I want to find out the fraction of liquid at this point B, what I'll do is that if I want to find out the fraction of liquid, I'll take the distance S divided by the total distance, which is S plus R, which is this formulation, which comes out to be 73%, and the remaining would be the alpha fraction. I hope this was clear to you guys.
Yes, sir, clear.
Yes.
Now, okay. Now, the important thing is to understand how the microstructure develops in a system. Uh, in any material, solidification, the way you solidify a material, that means the way you convert liquid to solid, would determine how your microstructure looks like. And in a phase diagram, it is important to understand how the phases evolve as you solidify a material. We are again looking into copper nickel system, which is two component system, and it is isomorphous system. Isomorphous means that there is complete solubility of one component in another. If you look at alpha phase, from 0 to 100%, although I'm showing you a portion of the diagram, from 0 to 100%, you can have alpha present. The alpha regime is present throughout the composition range. Although for some compositions it would be existing for a higher temperature, for some compositions it would be existing for a lower temperature, but irrespective of the temperature, for all the compositions you can have alpha existing. That means copper is completely soluble in nickel, or nickel is completely soluble in copper. Now, let's say I have a composition of 35 weight percent nickel. This is my material. I have this material in which I have 35 weight percent nickel. This is my composition of the overall material. And if I take this material to round about 1300 degrees centigrade, what is the phase that I'll have?
L phase, sir.
The liquid. Yes, the L phase, which is liquid. And if you see over here, I have represented the whole material. This is the whole material that I have represented with green color, and it is liquid phase. Now, if I start to cool it down, let's say if I start to cool it down and I get to this liquidus boundary. When I reach to this liquidus boundary at point B, I have liquid phase and alpha phase coexisting. Clear enough? Clear or not? All right. Just close to this boundary, I have both the phases coexisting. And if I look at the composition of both the phases, what is the composition of alpha?
46%.
46% nickel, and the composition of liquid is 35%. All right. 35. That means there are both phases existing. Now, whenever you are solidifying, this is the process of solidifying. Alpha is solid, L is liquid. So majority of the region represented in green color is liquid. And at certain locations, random locations, you have represented alpha with solid dots. That means the nuclei of alpha has started to form at different localities, at different regions. Solid has started to develop. Clear enough?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, if I further cool it down, let's say to point C, I would see that now the composition of liquid has reached to 32% and solid has reached to 43%. Clear?
Yes, sir.
And if you look at the respective proportions of liquid and solid, you would see in this microstructure that solid particles have grown, their size has increased, and the liquid portion has decreased. Clear enough? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Further cooling it down to point B, just close to the solidus line, you have liquid having 24% nickel, solid having 36% nickel. You would see most of the region is basically alpha solid and very minimum amount of liquid is being left. Clear enough?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, if I cross this solidus line, the blue line is solidus line where all of it is in the form of alpha. Below solidus line, the phase that is existing is only alpha solid. So, would you expect any liquid below this line?
No, sir.
All right.
No.
So, you would see that these small grains, they have grown up into different grains, and the region between the grains is basically, what is it? The regions between the grains is what?
Grain boundary, sir.
It is the grain boundary. All right. If you remember, different grains growing in different directions, when they come in contact, this region becomes the grain boundary region. All right.
Yes, sir.
So if I show you, this is the liquid to solidification process, and ultimately at room temperature you will get this form of microstructure where you'll have solid alpha grains having their respective grain boundaries. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Acha ji. If this is clear, now the important thing is, if you look at the compositions of solid, if I look at the composition of solid, solid composition is varying from 46% to roughly 36, or ultimately at this point E, the composition would be 35%. Similarly, liquid composition is changing from 35% to roughly 24%. Clear? Is
Yes,
it
sir.
clear or not?
Yes,
Now,
sir.
this 46% solid is the solid that solidified initially, then this 43%, then 40%, and ultimately moving on to 35%. So there is a gradual change in the composition of solid that is solidifying. If you want to have, you could essentially have two kinds of these structures. Let us see what is the difference between chord versus equilibrium phases. What is essentially happening is, in the solidification process, composition of alpha changes as we solidify. The first alpha to solidify has a composition of 46 weight%. Last alpha, which is solidified, has a composition of 35 weight% nickel. If you have a fast rate of cooling means you would not allow diffusion to take place. All right, you are cooling very fastly. You will have a cold structure. What is meant by a cold structure? I'll tell you in a minute's time. In a cold structure, the first solid to solidify would have highest amount of nickel, and there would be a gradual change in the composition, and the last solid that would solidify would have about less than 35 weight% of nickel. Clear enough?
Yes,
Is
sir.
this clear? This is one of the grain that I have taken, only one grain, and it would be same in all the grains. But if you cool it very slowly, you will ultimately get a uniform composition of nickel throughout the material. There would be sufficient enough of time for this 46% to diffuse to this less than 35%, so that the overall composition of the grain is essentially 35 weight percent of the nickel, which is being represented by the phase diagram. If you go and look at the phase diagram, and if I ask you that, let's say I I have a material at this location, which is alpha. What is the composition of this material over here at this point X? इस point X के ऊपर मटेरियल की composition क्या होगी?
35%.
35% होगी. और 35% कैसे होगी कि अगर मैं यहाँ से कोई सैंपल लूँ, या मैं यहाँ से कोई सैंपल लूँ, या यहाँ से, या किसी भी जगह से कोई सैंपल लूँ, तो 35% निकल मिलेगा मुझे. This is the equilibrium. This is the equilibrium representation. All right. ये फेज डायग्राम इक्विलिब्रियम फेज डायग्राम है. इसके मुताबिक अगर मैं पॉइंट एक्स पे हूं तो मेरे मटेरियल में हर जगह 35 वेट परसेंट निकल होना चाहिए. लेकिन अगर मैं ए से एक्स पे आ रहा हूं और आई एम कमिंग वेरी फास्ट, तो इट इज अ नॉन इक्विलिब्रियम प्रोसेस. ऑलराइट. फिर मेरे पास जो स्ट्रक्चर होगा दैट वुड बी अ कोल्ड स्ट्रक्चर. जब भी सॉलिडिफिकेशन बहुत तेजी से होगी तो इक्विलिब्रियम अचीव नहीं हो पाएगा, और स्ट्रक्चर जो नजर आएगा वो इक्विलिब्रियम स्ट्रक्चर नहीं होगा, वो नॉन इक्विलिब्रियम स्ट्रक्चर होगा. जैसे कि मैंने आपको बताया कि ये जो कोल्ड स्ट्रक्चर है, दिस कोल्ड स्ट्रक्चर इज अ नॉन इक्विलिब्रियम स्ट्रक्चर एंड इट इज ड्यू टू फास्ट कूलिंग. क्लियर एनफ? Is it clear or not?